I think last time we were on the podcast, you were anticipating it as someone who wasn't familiar with the story.
Right.
Someone who hadn't read the book or seen the Lynch film.
I feel like that served me a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I did go see the movie and I had a general understanding of like the world and what was going on. So it wasn't hard to follow at all. What was going on. Some of the motivations of the like the bigger, like hierarchical characters, some of their motivations were a little more difficult to like wrap my head around. But by the end of the movie, I had a handle on it and it was fine. But I do think that it helped me a little bit just kind of enjoy the movie.
Yeah.
Because I didn't really know, you know, who's going to die, who was going to live. So I was still surprised by some of those like things that happened, like the deaths of some main characters. No spoilers yet, but
right.
like, you know, some characters do die. And so I didn't know that was coming. I didn't know how it was going to happen, any of that stuff. So I still, like someone that was reading it for the first time or viewing it for the first time, was holding on to that hope of like, maybe they'll get away. Maybe they'll survive, you know, maybe. Yeah. And so I think that was good. But at the end of the day, I think reading the book or watching it ahead of time wouldn't have been terrible because obviously at this point, I'm going to go like the next movie's not going to come out for a while. So I'm probably going to go ahead and like
look into it.
Yeah. Watch the other movie, read the book, stuff like that.
I was definitely curious because I had read the book last year.
Yeah.
And so for me, it wasn't what's going to happen. It's how are they going to execute, or like, what are they going to keep? What are they going to cut out? How are they going to execute this? So I was really curious. I know that when I read the book, like the first 70 pages or so, I struggled with how the universe worked, because I think I mentioned this last time, at least how...
What was it about the universe that messed you up?
Well, how Herbert writes the book is he writes it as if you exist in the world and like you don't need things explained.
You don't need the exposition because you already understand how the government works. He
throws you into the world, and like he'll say names and the names of like political figures. He'll talk about the Ben Gesserit, who was, you know, like the witch clan, I guess, that Paul's mom's in, and just talk about them and not in any way like explain. You have to piece it together through the context.
That scene was so cool.
And like, especially the political motivations in the book, I struggled to be like, wait, why is the Emperor sending them to Dune? Why is that such a big deal? And then I'm like, I get the sense this is a trap, but I don't know exactly why. And I feel like in the movie, they do a really good job of like hinting at the political motivations.
Well, and the funny thing about it is that they didn't do anything, which I actually thought this was really well done. They didn't do anything overt to tell you like the Emperor is doing this because of this and like get specific. They had just hinted at the fact that the Emperor was threatened by how powerful that family, what's the family again?
Oh, the Atreides?
Yeah, the Atreides.
Yeah.
It was threatened by like how powerful they were becoming in like the political structure of, I guess, the universe, you would say.
Yeah.
And so he was basically sending them on like a suicide mission.
Yeah. I think...
But he messed up by letting his soldiers be used, didn't he?
Yeah, that's the thing is like him sending his like Imperial Guard, quote unquote. I can't remember exactly what they're called in the
Imperium soldiers or something like that. Warriors
really tips the hand of be like, oh, the Emperor is on the side of the Harkonnens.
Yeah. And
the people who survived the attack, ideally no one survived, so no one knows that the Emperor was involved. But the people who survive are like, okay, so the Emperor wanted this to happen. This wasn't just a Harkonnen usurping. This was, you know. Anyway, I was curious to get your take on it because it's a lot for them to world build and only cover half the book. And so it's like, I felt like they did a really good job of building the universe, but not making that too much of the movie because they can't, because it's only half of the story. So if they were telling the full story, they could really dive into the world building because they have all the story to get to. But I felt like with this, they couldn't world build too much because then you'd world build and the movie would end and you never really got to any of the story.
Yeah. So definitely a unique challenge, I feel like, and you have to make it entertaining and you have to push forward the story while also giving the audience enough information to know what's going on, and have some sort of payoff at the end. So it's not like, this is the political structure, end of movie.
Yeah.
So like from my perspective, I actually thought, like, I paid really close attention and I picked up on most of what was going on. And actually, I didn't need any help after the movie. Like, I walked out and was like, I understood like why the Emperor was doing what he was doing, why Dune is so important, like why the native people that live there are so important. But more than that, I felt like the story focused much more on like the relationships in the movie than even like the political structure or like what was going on Dune or anything like that. Like, I felt like probably the biggest chunk of the movie that felt like they were focusing really hard on one thing was the relationship between Timothée Chalamet's character and his mom. Yeah. Like, they focused... I thought the movie took a lot of time to focus on that relationship. And I think whenever you think about it, it makes a lot of sense because there is a certain amount of betrayal that he must be feeling from his mom because she kind of kept certain things from him. And really in that scene where she sends him in with like the leader of that clan, like she's either sending him to his death or he passes the test and comes out alive. Either way, it's like after you come out of that room, you put together the fact that my mom was about to send me to my death potentially.
Yeah, there's definitely some really solid divided loyalties there because she was not supposed to have a son. And so she is I can't remember the exact word they use for her relationship to Daddy Atreides. To Oscar Isaac. But like, she's basically like not a concubine, but
I think they do use that word though.
She is like in Oscar Isaac's eyes, she is more than a concubine, but like politically she's a concubine. Right. So in a way she has to serve Duke, and she trusts him enough to just go ahead and have a son because she wasn't supposed to have a son. Right. The Bene Gesserit are only supposed to have daughters. So she trusts him enough to like give him a son, but she's also still loyal to the Bene Gesserit.
Does the book go into like how they ended up together at all?
You know, I can't remember. I mean, I read it over a year ago, and I've only read the novel once.
The movie made them so...
But there is
likable.
It's not just like a political relationship. Like, there is genuine care between them.
Yeah, and you sense that. You can feel that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what makes it interesting is like the Bene Gesserit would really like it if it was just professional. Yeah. Because they're putting their people, their, witches in positions of power to, in the shadows, control, the future of, the Galactic Empire. And what's interesting is that both the natives of Arrakis, the Sand People, they have their own like Messiah mythology, but then so do the Bene Gesserit. They have like a Messiah, and they kind of converge onto Paul. Like Paul kind of checks both those boxes. Right. Yeah. And so that's what I really love about the story at large is the first two novels, like Paul's relationship with his own mythology, which is something I want to talk to you about, someone who doesn't know where it's going. I'm kind of interested to see where you see the story going. Because I think they did a really good job of teasing Paul's biggest conflict going forward without like whacking you over the head with it.
Right. Well, to me, it seems like Paul doesn't really have... I feel like his loyalty is going to be to like the native people of Dune, because I think he feels a stronger connection to that group of people. Yeah. But I think the part of the conflict is going to be figuring out how to have them be free and win whatever kind of war may be coming.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of them, but up against, 2 or 3 separate groups of, groups or families or whatever it is that you want to call it, like the group of witches, like the group of people that ran the spice trade, and then the emperor and his men, where it's like you have those 3 groups of people that are kind of all against you. Well, potentially, because I guess the group of witches could want Paul to come with them, but I don't feel like
who knows what witches want.
But I don't feel like he ever. And we're calling them witches, and I don't feel.
I don't even know if that's
really
accurate,
witches.
but it just
it's kind of
right.
The vibe is there.
It feels right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I feel like the conflict is partially going to be like, how does he get the people that he loves out of what he's kind of going to get them into?
Yeah.
But I could be way off base. I would have no idea.
I mean,
what's coming in.
I was interested in that because I've only read the first 2 books.
Right.
So like I'm not the biggest Dune mythology nerd. Like I read the book once, really liked it. Mm-hmm. The terminology is like really weird. So like I am going to forget names and stuff. Like I can't even remember how to pronounce the Messiah name that the Ben Gesserit have. It's like the Quidditch Hatterach or whatever.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Well, but though all the names are very cool.
Yeah.
Not the easiest to.
Well, the best name is Duncan, Idaho.
Let me just say, I was just about to say that exact thing. Duncan, that's a name. Makes sense. Everybody else's name is like Paul or Duke and stuff like that. Normal.
Rachel.
Duncan. Yeah. Good solid name. Yeah. Idaho?
I'm behind it, man.
I'm fine with the name. But in this world, is there an Idaho? That's a state.
I mean, if you think about it.
What is the meaning of the name,
the
word,
place,
I
like,
guess?
in the far future. So, like, there was a point in the Dune
where there
history
was an Idaho.
where there was just a normal Earth with an Idaho, and it's left over.
Whoa.
Man,
our boy Duncan Idaho.
Our boy Duncan Idaho. Just like a guy you want to get a beer with.
Just a guy that you just... I felt comfort knowing he just existed somewhere in the universe. Like, even in the parts of the movie that he wasn't there, I was like, Duncan's still out there, there. He's just out there doing his thing. Yeah. And I feel good just knowing that he's out there doing his thing. What a freaking perfect casting.
Yeah. I guess before we get into, like, individual parts of the movie we liked.
Yeah.
I just will say, like, the one thing, having read the first 2 novels, and like the first 2 novels really tell Paul's story, and then from what I understand, the rest of the Dune novels kind of like take place in like the generations after. So like I really felt good stopping at the second book and just be like, okay, I read Paul's story for the most part.
Yeah.
So like I know what Herbert is doing thematically, and so watching this, I can see that Denis really has a grasp on the original themes of the novel. And like he was like editing it in a way that really highlights certain things. But I was wondering, like, for you only watched half of the first book, basically.
Yeah.
I was like, did you feel like you had a good grasp of like what the movie is like trying to say or set up? You know what I mean? Not necessarily that like, did you feel like the themes were lost because you only saw half of a story, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it did feel a little bit like we stopped in the middle of a movie.
Yeah.
It felt like a little bit like, okay, like I'm ready to see.
Yeah.
Like I'm ready to kind of see where this second act takes me into the third act. And it kind of felt like we stopped in the middle of the second act.
Yeah, it felt like you were watching the OG Titanic VHS,
and I had to switch the tape.
You had to switch, but then something came up and you couldn't switch them, and you have to save it for later.
Yeah,
yeah.
So it kind of felt like the movie just ended in the middle of the second act or at the beginning of the second act, where it was like much of the movie was us learning about the Atreides family and Paul and who he is, and like what's important to him and why we can kind of, hook our trailer to that camp a little bit and be on Paul's side. I felt like much of the movie was that, and a little bit of that conflict, like I was saying, with Paul and his mom and some of his relationships and stuff like that, and kind of learning maybe not how to be a leader, but that I think there were some themes in there about leadership and coming of age and, you know, having responsibilities and being true to like who you are in your responsibilities. Like I liked that him and his dad were talking, and they were talking about like him saying, what if I don't want to be, you know, who you need me to be?
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that revealed so much about their relationship whenever his dad answered, like, you could do nothing else for the rest of your life and be exactly who I need you to be, which is my son. And it's like, and it just gives that sense of, you know, sometimes you find yourself in this position of having to lead people, and it's like you're not equipped for it, you're not ready for it, but if your heart is true, then, you know, and you lead from that place, then you'll be okay. Or maybe not even okay, but like, you know, that you're leading from like a right place. So people are going to want to follow you because you're leading from that place of like honesty and truth. But, I don't even know if that's like a theme moving forward, but that's just kind of like the stuff that I was seeing.
Yeah. I mean, like in a way
movie.
that is spot on, because I don't remember if the line Duke says to Paul about like, if the only thing you ever are is my son, that's enough. Like, I don't remember if that's in the novel, but even if it isn't, it makes sense to what Paul's facing, because like destiny is a huge part, like facing your future. Like there's the scene in the tent where Paul's having those visions. Do you remember that part?
Yeah. Yeah.
And of like these, like in the books, they call them jihads, like these like holy wars. And he's like really pushing against this future. And that's a huge part of Paul's story, is this situation is thrust upon him to like take over his family after, you know, things happen.
Yeah.
And it's this idea of like, is this too much? Like, is this really what I want to do? Like, is this really my destiny to be a Messiah figure?
Yeah.
And knowing that's like what Paul struggles with, and then hearing Duke say like, and, you know, in less words, like, hey, that Messiah stuff, that's whatever. You're my son, and that's what's important.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that's exactly what Paul needs to hear in that moment, where he's feeling from his mom's side, like the Ben Gesserit, like, oh, he's this special thing. The natives on the planet are seeing him and fitting him into like their Messiah figure.
Yeah.
And it's just like all this mythology is going to be built around him, but like really what matters is like all that stuff is just noise.
Yeah.
Like, you need to trust who you are and like be who you want to become.
Well, and it's like that. I think it's that idea of like, if you're the Messiah, like truly, and you aren't true to who you are, like, because I mean, and we say who you are in the context of who Paul is in the story. Like, he's a very like morally upright, like, does the right thing, like wants to help people, like doesn't like the idea of, you know, walking all over the native people to kind of get what they want, like, you know, and they fold all these themes in there of like who these people are, that they're good people, that they want to lead from a place of like unity and not like just walking all over people to get what you want and stuff like that. So like within that context, him being true to who he is that, where it's like, if you are this Messiah, it won't matter if you lose who you are, because you're going to become something that you don't recognize, where it's like, if what's important is like, you're going to have this role thrust upon you. Like, you are now the figurehead of this family. And so if you forget who you are and you lose who you are, then that's the only way that this is going to go bad. Because if you stay true to who you are and your family and who they are, then you're going to lead from a place of unity, and people are going to want to follow you.
Yeah, it's when I read the books, the thing that like really impressed me, because most franchises that go like the Messiah chosen one route don't do this and become introspective and critique the idea of a chosen one or a Messiah.
Right. Yeah.
And without giving too much away, I feel comfortable saying it because the movie like teases it with Paul's visions and stuff. But like the idea that they're even teasing this idea that Paul doesn't want to be a Messiah, and the things he sees coming of like the things that will happen in his name, like wars and stuff, is like this idea of like, oh, like sometimes the mythology, this mythic idea of who you are becomes bigger than what like you actually are, and it takes on a life of its own, and he starts to see how like bad things can be done in his name, or in the name of any type of power. And I love how these novels critique that and like be careful with the idea of chosen ones, because it can take on a life of its own, and things can start to happen in its name that isn't right. And the fact that Paul is like, I don't want to be like a savior.
I don't want to be the figurehead that people
I just want to be a good person. And
that's good. That's good.
And the movie really teases that. And I think when I'm watching, I'm like, okay, Denis, like, I was afraid, like, I trusted Denis, but like sometimes you can get this book and be like, I just want to get lost in like the hero's journey action part of it, and not get lost in like, well, actually this book's kind of being introspective and critiquing its own like motifs of like the hero's journey, the Messiah complex.
Right.
And the fact that Denis was like, again and again in this movie, like, no, we're going to get there. We're going to get there.
Right.
It was really comforting. But
I heard him say in an interview that he was like, he's such a big fan of the books that I think he had read them like, and was very familiar with them from whenever he was like a young boy. Yeah. And he was like, I think he was saying in an interview, I'm paraphrasing, but basically that if I can make the movie and it's good enough for me, because he's like going to be the hardest critic on it, because he knows the book so well that like if it's going to be good enough for him, then it'll be good enough for most people. Yeah. Because he's so harsh on like the idea of like dreaming up what that book would be, turning into film.
But
which I think is the exact right person you want making the movie. I was saying to another buddy of ours the other day that it's like, we're so lucky to live in a time where like one of the most beloved sci-fi stories of all time is being made by one of the greatest filmmakers of our time, where it's just like with the technological advances that we have available to us now, like what they can shoot and like what they can make come to life. Like we're just so lucky to live in a time where it's like all these things can kind of come together, and it's like in your wildest dreams, you know, one of your favorite filmmakers making one of the most beloved sci-fi stories.
Well, like it's just, it's sad that it's so rare, but someone who takes on a property like this and they do it not because it's a job, like, oh, like I just need to direct a new movie because that's my job. But like Denis is like, no, this story means something to me,
personal,
and I understand what the story is trying to do. And it's like, it's rare that happens. Like you have like Peter Jackson's take on Lord of the Rings. Like he actually cared about the material, but like a lot of times like, book properties get turned into movies, and it's just by like these, I'm not trying to, put people down, but like like journeyman directors who like, it's a job and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like,
hey, and some amazing movies have come from that sort of thing where it's like, hey, there's this book that exists. It's an amazing book. You read it 2 years ago and you want to write a script for it and make a movie out of it. Like that's some of my favorite movies have come from situations like that. Nothing against that, but it is rare that you get something like this where it's so personal.
Someone who's like becoming like a rising name in the film industry of like this guy, I hate the word auteur, but like someone who has a really distinct filmmaking style and like tone. It's like when you watch a Denis Villeneuve film, like it's like, oh, I know that's a Denis film. Yeah. Kind of like you watch a Ridley Scott film, you're like, oh, that was definitely a Ridley Scott film, and, or Nolan or whatever. But
I heard somebody say that it could be this generation's Star Wars.
I mean, it's one of the things George Lucas was inspired by.
Yeah. That's crazy, man.
Yeah.
That's wild.
That would be dope. I mean, I really hope they're obviously going to finish the first book, like, part 2. I really hope they make Dune Messiah the sequel because I don't think anyone's going to expect what's going to happen in that.
Really?
I've kind of hinted on like how it becomes very introspective and like critical of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Dune Messiah is like something else, and I would love to see it.
Interesting.
I would love to see them finish Paul's journey.
I'm sure that they're dreaming as big as you can imagine.
I haven't read the rest of the book, so I don't know what else they could do.
Well.
Yeah. Was there anything else?
Hopefully it just keeps doing well.
Was there anything else about the movie that really impressed you beyond just like
I'm always
themes
impressed
of it?
I'm always impressed by the Denis' ability to just, no matter what's going on in the story, he just has an ability to make whatever is going on the screen look so interesting.
Yeah.
Every shot of the movie is just beautiful. Like you could pause it anywhere and frame it and put it on your wall, and it's just like every shot, it feels like, is just so intentional and on purpose and well thought out. Like from the costumes to the colors to the lighting to everything, it just feels so well thought out, and the whole movie is just gorgeous. Like you're like some of those scenes where they're like on the runway of places where they're like landing ships, and they're like bringing in like huge pieces of machinery and stuff like that, and even those are like beautiful shots, like in beautiful images of the desert. And it's just like, that was just a really striking one. His movies are just like that. But just every shot
very visceral,
was just so interesting to look at. And then you add in the fact that Hans Zimmer is just like fully going for it.
Yeah.
In every part of that movie,
He's
like
hitting
with
those
the music
keys extra hard.
I mean, he is just absolutely going for it.
Yeah.
And
if you see it in Dolby, you're just like,
it's a ride with like, when the sound is up. There were some parts of that movie where it's just like, this is stressful. Like I'm stressed, and it's like the music and the sounds and everything. It's just,
well, I mean, that's what you want.
It's what Nolan does so well, where it's like you take this huge scale, this huge budget, like all these moving parts. It could so easily, if one little piece of machinery or one little cog is wrong, the whole thing can crumble. Yeah. But then it's just, they use these grand, huge, like images and things on the screen, and they just bring it down to earth with like the acting and the relationships and the story. It just brings you right down to earth. And it like was a very big movie with a big budget, and it looked gorgeous and beautiful and like all of this stuff. But like, it was all of those things that you want it to be. But at the same time, the scenes like felt intimate too, where it didn't feel so big that it was like you couldn't grasp it.
Well, like that's the thing with this movie. Specifically for Dune, it was the right choice to film a lot of it on site, on location, and not just being a giant warehouse of green screens. Yeah. I think in general that should be the case, but with like a movie like Dune, like, I don't know if you picked up on it.
I was actually shocked at how much of that was real, because like, I assumed that there was like some CGI of the desert, which I'm sure that there was. Mm-hmm. But I think that there was a lot more actual desert than you think.
They filmed in the desert straight up. And I like that. You go back to the original Star Wars, like that's what made those movies so special. Is like, yes, the first Star Wars movies were known for innovating a lot of special effects, but like there's still a lot of on-site, on location. It feels real. When Luke is looking at the twin suns, it's like that just feels so real and visceral because they're in the desert. But with Dune, like it's a story about ecology. Like it's just as much about like man's relationship to nature as it is about like themes about power and destiny and stuff like that. And in the future, it is also just as much a story about man's relationship with nature and how, you know, like civilizations, how mankind try and force nature into its image. And like how foolish that can be.
Well, and I think that's so obvious in the sand snakes.
Yeah, the sandworms.
The sandworms, where everyone that comes to the planet is, how do we avoid the sandworms? How do we escape them? How do we fight them? How do we keep them back? How do we keep them out?
Yeah.
And the native people have figured out how to harness them,
how to go with it,
how to work with nature.
Well, that's interesting. Like the movie opens with that little monologue from one of the natives going like, like life isn't a problem to be solved. It's something to flow with.
Yeah.
And like, that's its whole theme right there, is like, when it comes to the planet, when it comes to power, when it comes to all these things, like, you just need to flow naturally with the process.
Yeah.
And it's when you try and get greedy, overpower things, whether that be life, nature, politics, that's when things go wrong.
Yeah.
And I think the movie is trying to, like, in every aspect of it, just be like, no, it's about flowing with it, like winds hitting a sail.
Yeah.
It's about harnessing that kind of power where you flow naturally with the process of life instead of trying to domineer it.
Yeah.
And I think them, as much as possible, filming on location really adds to that, because I'm like, I felt like I was literally on the planet Arrakis.
Yeah.
And that's what you want in this type of story.
Yeah. Well, it was gorgeous. I really enjoyed the opening scenes on their home planet as well.
Oh yeah.
What a unique
look. I loved that scene after Paul got tested by the Ben Gesserit.
Yeah.
And he's talking to his mom, and it's like outside, it's foggy. Like you can only see like people when they're up close. And so like, it just really added texturally to this idea of like, okay, Paul is now seeing a new side of his mother. He's confused. The fog is like adding to that idea of like confusion.
I can't really see.
Yeah, that was really well done.
Yeah. I just kind of put this together as we were talking about like nature in the film and what they're trying to say about working with nature and like riding that wave, where I had heard someone else say right after I'd watched the movie in an interview or something that there are no computers in the whole movie, which is then just playing to that theme even more of like, we're depending on our senses and we're depending on going with nature.
They do have human computers in Dune. I don't know. They didn't really go into it, but there's that one guy who at the very beginning of the movie, they have him like do a calculation and he's like, like his eyes roll back. He's a human computer in the Dune.
Was he like the doctor guy?
No, he wasn't the doctor. The doctor was the guy who betrayed the family. Yeah. He was a different,
so that was a different guy.
aide. Yeah. He was like a
so are there
heavier
human
set guy.
computers?
Yeah.
I gotcha.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly how those people in the universe function, like if they're just like genetically engineered smart people, or I can't remember, but they do have these people called human computers who can just like do these calculations in their head, like insanely.
Interesting.
So, but hopefully we don't have to wait too long for the sequel.
Yeah,
that was the one thing. Like the movie finished, and I was just like, I really hope that ending in the middle of the story doesn't turn people off.
I feel like it's going to be 2 years before we get the next one.
I just was like I feel like this is for how dense the novel is, this is a crowd pleaser. But I don't want people turned off by that ending.
I would not want them to rush this.
No.
So it's like, I just...
Yeah. Well, I mean, they did get greenlit for a sequel, and so hopefully they can get on it pretty quickly.
I'm sure they're working on it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that they are. But, I could spend probably an hour discussing what that peanut butter chocolate goop was that dude was just dipping himself in to heal.
That I don't know.
Man, I would love an explanation of that.
Dude, that was
Does
great.
he have gills? Like, how is he under there?
I don't know what that was about. That was awesome though.
It was really cool. It looked crazy.
I love, like, especially in sci-fi movies, when they just add these details to the universe.
Yes.
That really...
They never explain it, but it's just so odd.
It's just there to like remind you, like, this is a different world.
Yeah.
And it's just, I love it. Or like, did you see that like weird spider thing in his like lair? Like that cut you real quick?
Yeah. I was like, okay, so that's going to come back.
I was like,
and then they just never showed it again.
I was like, I just want more of that, like these like little set dressing, like texture elements that just add to like fill out the universe.
It's so good, man.
I love
that kind of stuff is so fun. And it's so great because they probably somebody spent so much time making that and making it look amazing, and it was in there for like 3 seconds.
Yeah,
but I will remember that.
One
3
guy,
seconds.
one VFX artist, like worked 12 hours a day, like lost his marriage building this spider guy, only for it to be in a 30-second shot. And never come back.
But I'll never forget it.
I'll never forget it.
We'll use it in the second movie.
Yeah.
I really loved how long I don't know the villain's like name, but how long his dress was in that one scene.
Oh,
he was like sitting down and then he like floated up really high.
The main Harkonnen guy, yeah.
Yeah, and it was just like so long.
Well, that's the thing. Like in the novel, he floats, but the implication is like he's so fat in the novel. He has like this floating device that he uses to hold up his fat. Like he's floating for the purpose of like holding up the folds of his belly. Because I
literally can't do anything else.
But I felt like in the movie, they make him look big.
Yeah.
But the floating is way more menacing.
It looks like he's floating for clout in this movie.
Yeah,
like,
I actually kind of like that.
I'm not walking just because I don't have to.
Yeah, it like when he started floating, like it looked menacing and creepy.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, this is what...
It was awesome.
Yeah, the novel just made it seem like he needed something to hold up his fat because otherwise he couldn't move.
Yeah.
Which is like, that's an interesting idea of like, symbolizing greed. But
yeah.
I was like, give me the creepy floaties.
Yeah, dude. It was so cool. Man, that scene at the table is so good.
Oh, yeah.
Gosh, there's so many. I need to watch it again. Actually, I haven't watched it a second time.
I haven't been able to watch it a second time yet.
We only have 10 days left.
Well, it's like, it's a hard thing to be like, do I have time for this 2.5 hour movie? It's already 10 p.m.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to make it.
Nah.
So,
but yeah, I need to watch it again before it stops streaming. But no, I mean, I'm just excited for the next one. I'm excited that we get to live within the time period of the excitement of having the second one come out and furthering the story, and all the actors are so good in it. And,
it's been a while since like we've had, not counting Marvel, like these big multi-movie franchises that like the whole like country gets really into. Like, you know, you had Lord of the Rings, you had Harry Potter. It's been a minute since we've had something like that where
everyone is just like in for it.
Yeah. And like for the most part, fun. People are discovering it for the first time, and just like these big tentpole events. Like, I'm really excited for the second one because I think the first one took a lot of people by surprise. I didn't think it was going to do this well. Yeah. Like, not only in terms of like how much money it made, but like what the audience reactions was being mostly positive. I'm like really excited to see people show up for the second one being more excited, knowing what they're getting into, knowing the universe a bit more. And then like maybe people catching up on streaming of it. I'm really excited for that.
Yeah. As long as Denis is tied to it, I feel like as long as somebody's involved that wants to honor the story that much, it plays almost to the story of the character of Paul, where it's like, maybe you did or didn't want this like position of power, but it's like thrust upon you, and like people trust you now you gotta bring it to do what's right, so it's like, well, what I almost feel like as long as he's tied to it, it's gonna like be
what I've heard good. Is he was saying stuff about how like the second movie is going to be a lot of action because he like laid the groundwork of the story, and I'm just like, I feel like the second movie is just going to be like ears pinned back, just like, oh my goodness,
total insanity. The action that was in this movie was really good. So
I'm excited.
Me too.
Is there? Well, I feel like we pretty much said everything we want to say about Dune.
I think we talked it out.
How you Dune about Dune?
Do you want more coffee?
I don't think I should.
Do you want more absolute gasoline?
That really is kind of what it tastes like. But I keep coming back.
Yeah, I keep coming back for more.
It's cold now, but I don't care.